And thank you, Satya, for the great impulse and actually the scope that you showed. Actually, for the people who don't know, the food market is the largest market in the world. And transforming the global food market is one of the biggest challenges of the 21st century. So why do we need to transform it? You hinted already at some points for the people who are not so much into this topic yet. So the global food system is taking up 40% of land usage at the moment, 70% of fresh water supply. And although you said I shouldn't say it, we are growing to 10 billion people in the near future, and we really do not have the resources to feed these people if we continue as we do. Furthermore, it is responsible for 1/3 of global CO2 emissions. And in addition, this year and in the last 2 years, we were hit by several very strong crises. We had the pandemic, we have the Ukraine war, we have the climate crisis that led to crop failures. So food security and a disruption of the global food supply chain was seen and disrupted really the food system. So today we would like to discuss furthermore some solutions, how a sustainable food system could be set up in future. And I will start with you, David. So one of the big solutions in the future for sustainable food system is creating alternative diversified proteins. So there are different technologies out there, from plant-based, precision fermentation, biomass fermentation, also in the long run, cell-based. You focus on precision fermentation. Maybe you can clarify what is out there, why do you focus on that, and what is the great impact this technology is bringing for a sustainable food system?
Absolutely. Thank you, Manon, and hello, everyone. My name is David Bucca. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Change Foods. We started in Australia. That's my accent. I actually flew in from Melbourne this morning, so I'm a little bit wheezy, but please forgive me. And my background is actually aerospace engineering and aviation for about 14 years, predominantly working for Boeing, until about 6 years ago when I changed my diet. I learned a lot about food and agriculture and technology, and I believe that technology can play a profound role, as Satya mentioned earlier, in terms of the solution to this problem. And I could also see how leveraging my aerospace knowledge of taking exotic materials and creating a sustainable supply chain in a highly regulated, small margin industry is the exact same parallels that we're now looking to explore into food. So 6 years ago, I realized I could make a much greater impact on the world by actually, instead of designing a slightly more efficient part of a plane, actually thinking about how can I leverage my skill set to actually put it to maximize impact. And that's where I discovered food and technology and happened to have the right skill set to move into that equation. And then I really started looking at exploring all of the different technologies, learning about where I could, first of all, felt there was the biggest gap and opportunity, and that's where I learned about plant-based innovations, which you've probably all heard of and seen, in terms of plant-based meat alternatives, for example, like Beyond Meat and Impossible and so forth, which I'm still sort of calling in the new wave of food tech, sort of the first wave, even though they're traditionally considered third generation plant-based proteins, because the original ones were for Buddhist reasons in Taiwan back many decades ago. And so the plant-based industry's evolved, but I really got excited by cell-based technologies. And the reason for that is because I think that's what's really needed to think about good nutritional supply for the mass market consumer. How do we provide products that actually mimic, biomimic, the exact thing that people are looking for? But of course, then you have cost as a key challenge. So how do you create scalable supply chains able to create these products at the right cost? Because that's of paramount importance. You can't have the best quality ingredient, but food is a global problem and need, and so you really have to think about global supply chains. Anyway, so that's what led me down the path of, in the cell-based world, you have acellular agriculture and cellular agriculture. Fermentation is also got many different sub-sectors of fermentation. There's traditional fermentation, like your tofus, tempehs, beer, wine, which is obviously centuries old. You've then got precision fermentation, which is what we're leveraging. So that allows us to create bio-identical ingredients. So that means we can create, actually we're working on animal-free dairy and cheese, and I'll talk to that and why we're doing that soon. But we can create identical proteins as you would find them in cow's milk. by leveraging fermentation. So you're really mixing old traditional fermentation with new technology in biotech to be able to actually create bioidentical ingredients, but with a fraction of the impact. So 98% less land use, 96% less water use, 65% less energy, and significantly less carbon emissions as well. So this is where really you can use transformative technologies to reproduce this increasing demand actually of cheese and dairy to supply all of the increasing needs for protein over the next 20 years, but via a much more efficient process. And so now it's about scaling that tremendously. And then the last category is cell-based technologies, which you've probably seen the likes of. It's basically the same biological processes you would see on an animal, but done in a bioreactor or a fermenter, effectively. So you can imagine one day in future, you'll have like beer breweries, you'll have beer, you'll have milk, and then you'll have meat, which then can be localized. It can help tremendously for food security issues. In fact, we're setting up now a 1.2 million litre fermentation facility in Abu Dhabi. We announced that in November in the UAE. So now we're creating dairy in the desert, which has never been done before. What does that mean? Well, it's profound because they're importing 90% of their food products today. Food security is a huge issue, considering all of the impacts that Manon mentioned earlier that are happening globally. And so thinking about transforming the future of food production using these technologies is really pivotal from a food security point of view. So places where you can't traditionally grow certain crops or even farm animals, therefore are very limited by that, which is then either going to drive up cost or create supply chain issues for the growing demand of these products. And so anyway, it's been a great journey. We're 3 years into the R&D, and now we're really considering the scalability. I think you really have to, any company or founder or anyone looking into this food space really has to consider scalability, in my opinion. And I think that's where there's a lot of opportunity as well. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, David. Next, I would like to ask Henrik, you are looking at something different. Also, a big challenge in the global food system is the inequality of food distribution and also malnutrition. So 800 million people in the world have malnutrition or are starving. On the other hand, we have 2 billion people obese. With Blendhub, you are trying to directly find a solution for this. Maybe you can elaborate further on that topic.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Henrik Stamm Kristensen, founder of 5 food tech companies. I've been in the industry since 1985, where I worked 12 years in the food ingredients company, an American-Danish company. I started my first food tech company in 97, and I actually want to congratulate Sadia, because you need to look a little bit back, and I think in the food tech space, we always talk a lot about the future. But Sadia talked about the past and today. First of all, in 1867, a guy called Henri Nestlé created a food product that was combining different dairy ingredients to feed children that were dying because their mothers could not feed them. So in 1867, we already had personalized nutrition. In around 1920, 1930, these companies were bought up by big marketing organizations called Nestlé, Coke, Danone, General Mills, Mondelez, and so on, that converted the food into brands. And brands were trust, and we all know what food products, processed food products are inside today. Nestlé leaked a document 6 months ago that 65% of their portfolio is unhealthy. So when I started my first company back in 97, I said, I'm going to bet on what I call kill the black box. That means transparency in global supply chains. And I knew it was not going to be an easy task, because these 100 food corporations today that over the last 100 years have created an enormous amount of brands and food products are today producing, like Sadia said, less than 20% of the world's food, but they take more than 80% of the world value, and I wanted to change that. So you could call me an idealist, or you could call me an impact investor. So since 97, I've invested in technology. First of all, in 2004, I set up a big blending, packaging, and quality control factory in Spain, because the biggest food product in the world is powder. It's called powder, guys. 40% of the world's food is powder. Powder was invented 6,000 years ago at least, spices from many different parts of the world, and powder is the best way to preserve food. I believe that the future of food is more and more powder. We just heard about fermentation, new technologies. It's going to be powder. We just heard about 40% of everything that is fresh is wasted. This will not change, but we have a fantastic technology that is called powder. So what we did is we concentrated actually on combining powders. So when we built that factory in Spain, we said this is the most stupid thing we have done in our life, because we cannot optimize and make accountability in global supply chains if we take powder from around the world to Spain, blend it, and send it around. I normally use the Nespresso capsules that we are having everywhere as a good example. The other thing we did was that we built a 40-foot container factory that we could deploy anywhere in the world. And actually, Andhra Pradesh, the border between Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu, in 2011, after inventing this portable factory, we localized it in India. And actually, we helped Indian entrepreneurs in the B2B and the B2C space launch food products in less than 90 days based on sustainable Indian ingredients. For example, millets, ragi, that you all know about. 55 cents for a sustainable protein source, 55 cents that is not coming out of India, and that can create an enormous amount of food products that are created now in Blendhub transparently. So what are the things we are doing now? Food as a service, getting transparency into recipe building with the right ingredients coming from local sources, accountability in global supply chains and in local supply chains, and focusing on what the end customer is actually today capable of paying for the food product.
Thank you very much. Next, Olaf. You as an industry veteran, former CEO of Metro, and also now the managing partner of Zintinus, a large food fund. So where do you see at the moment kind of the biggest trends in food investments, and how did it change now through the impact of the crisis of the last 2-3 years, becoming food security, secure food supply chain, more important issues?
Yeah, let me take a bit more optimistic view on things. I have observed that you made the change, the consumer made the change. Unfortunately, now we only have like 10% of the people here, but more than 50% of the people have considered alternative protein. 50% consume it every week here in Europe. And that was not the case 10 years ago. 10 years ago, if you did run a food company, there was little to no incentive to innovate, because 80% of innovation would fail. Why? Because we are driven by habits. And that has changed with the education that people like Satya, you, everyone here around has provided to the consumer and saying, listen, this is not good. This is not good for the environment, neither it's good for you. So there are alternatives. And as people learned about that, they started to vote with their purchases. So it's not by coincidence that insurgent brands have outperformed incumbent brands 5 times. 5 times higher sales growth than anyone else who was there before. The industry knows that, and the industry is also aware that that change is irreversible. So we need to build this kind of coalition with the people that can make the change happen. Instead of finger pointing and fighting, I think the only chance we have for positive transition is if we use that trend, and the consumer is leading the way. Food security has been a catalyst. I mean, we've been believing that food comes out of, like water out of the tap. It's there in the supermarket, there's no question about it. The Ukraine war, this terrible war, this criminal war, has opened eyes that food security is not a given. And guess what? Other people around the world know that since years, since decades. It's not by coincidence that exactly those regions have turned into the pioneers of food tech innovation, because Singapore today has 2% of self-supply. By 2030, they want to have 30%. Will they get to 30%? Maybe not. Maybe they get to 20%. But it's going to be a huge achievement. Israel has been a leading country in the space, and food security has been a main driver. So I see lots of good reasons why you should be optimistic. And you said it, 8 trillion. This is a huge, huge industry. And yes, it needs to bring financial reward to attract more capital from people like you and other funds, because that's going to turn out to be, the one that will make it happen eventually. Money alone can't do it. Money alone will not make the change. It needs to be people like you, like people in that industry that are willing to make that change, and I see that more and more.
Yeah, thank you very much. Maybe we can elaborate, because it's now the current issue on the food security topic. You just mentioned it, and go a little bit into kind of geostrategy strategy on that point. So we see that Singapore is very, very far ahead in terms of regulations. We see Middle East is catching up quite strongly. Israel very, very heavily investing into these technologies. So where is Europe at the moment in this play? And what do you think needs to be done on a regulatory topic to catch up?
Well, to start with, I think we in Europe we have a pole position. Europe is the #1 export region in the world for food. It is highly admired because of food quality. The EFSA, which is the regulator, has done a spectacular job in securing food safety for decades. Now that might make us a bit complacent and not seeing the necessity to accelerate on some of the regulation. And we see in Asia right now the regulation moves much quicker. We see the United States being much more liberal in that sense. But I would put a grain of caution into this. Sometimes being slow in some of the regulations is actually not that bad. Because don't forget, food is delicious. We love food. Food is something fantastic. Food is dangerous. Food can harm you if it's not good, if it is not really the thing that you need for your body. Therefore, having a regulation that pays attention to the interests of the people, I think makes sense. Can we afford 5 times for regulation and approvals for some of the technology? Definitely not. So we'll see a race of regions. I think that in itself will push Europe to its boundaries.
Okay. Thank you very much. So Henrik, because what is really fascinating about your approach is it's decentralized. So I think it's again playing into the same topic, having a regional supply chain, bringing producing, production and processing together. So how important is technology also in future in analytics and manufacturing?
It's funny you say, and again coming back to Olaf, it's not that I'm pessimistic, it's actually the other way around, because today the big companies are coming to us as well, and we are more than happy to host anyone on our network model. The first thing on technology is sharing value, and sharing value means transparency. So of course, when we are building a global network of multi-localized food production hubs, the complexity is, of course, how do you localize? We actually hire local people. We empower local value creation beyond the sale of commodities out of India. So we empower actually what we call tropicalization of the food product. So I know very well, as an example, the case of Singapore. The first guys that calls me is actually from the fermentation space. Solar Foods in Finland says, Henrik, we need to talk. Because Blendhub today, since 2015, we turned our model around and say, everyone are welcome. So this is openness, and it's use of a generic technology that is not sophisticated. It's taken time, it costs money, it costs a lot of passion around our people because our purpose is feeding all people in all places sustainably. The second thing is that when we deployed the first hub in India, the second technology part was how on earth can we control food quality. So we actually looked back into technology, and near-infrared spectroscopy has been around for 40 years. They have been selling equipment, companies like Bruker in Germany and Voss and so on. They were very expensive. Now technology prices are coming down. So we said, let's adapt near-infrared spectroscopy to actually control all incoming ingredients and all final blended products. So we adapted a technology that was coming down in price, that was more and more available. The software was not good enough, so we decided to build a software on top of that specific technology. And we decided to offer it to all our customers in incoming and outgoing products. And this technology, just to finalize, can today be used. We have millions of food batches in the cloud using this technology. And now we can start predicting what means sustainable recipes. So this is accelerating as well on top of a platform that was created in a very humble way. So it doesn't have to cost a lot when the transparency and the willingness to create shared value is actually there.
Yeah, thank you. David, to you the next question. So for the people who don't know, with the new technologies, actually the bioreactor is substituting the cow. So that's a new way to produce food, and that's very food secure because, of course, there's no impact from the environment and you need very little space. Yeah. But the bottleneck is really infrastructure and scaling up the production. You are one of the first ones, I think, in all these companies and new technologies who successfully is building up a huge facility now in United Arab Emirates. Why did you choose that? Why is the infrastructure part like really the bottleneck for the success of these technologies?
Sure, because a lot of the technology is transferred over from the pharmaceutical and medical space, and therefore all of the current infrastructure is pharmaceutical grade, not food grade, so you're paying a premium. And with a high value ingredient, all you need is one fermenter to produce a tiny amount that gets used in very small quantities. Whereas when you're talking about macronutrients, you need large volumes of food at a very, very competitively priced cost point. And therefore, you really have to find the right solutions for that. And given that, when you think about a cow, it's really just a metabolizer converting grass into ultimately what we're looking at in cheese is casein, which is the key protein that you need. The rest of the cow, if you look at it from a very draconian point of view, is byproduct. It's waste. And therefore you have to create byproduct industries, such as the leather industry and collagen and all of these things to basically make the whole system profitable. And even then, you still need $60 billion of global subsidies to make dairy a very fine margin industry. So it's just not a sustainable platform to continue to supply another 60% of, we have to produce 60% more food over the next 20 years than we've produced in the last 8,000 years. Right, so how do we do that with a platform that is so outdated? And the cow is a platform technology. It's a converter of grass into casein. So let's look at that same process rather than a macroorganism. Let's look at a microorganism. The process is the same. It converts sugars or carbon or glucose into casein, but in the most efficient organism that we know today, which is a cell. So you just can't compete on that scale. And also it's infinite. I mean, you can grow bacterial cell cultures, you can double its population in 20 minutes. So it's infinitely scalable, but where you really need to think about is a controlled production environment and large volumes because it's a macronutrient ultimately. So we chose the Middle East just because of, it's a great location because it's very globally centrally located for export and distribution. So we are producing powders, we need to export and produce them. We then have a sort of local model. So it's global supply of ingredients, but then localized production of final food ingredients with partners in North America, in Australia, and elsewhere. So it's a great central location, but also there's a huge amount of interest from the government because they're very aligned on food security. So there's huge support from the ministry right through in terms of financing the capex, the actual equipment itself, providing incentives and subsidies through the operating. So from an operating cost environment, I haven't found anywhere cheaper because energy is one of the key requirements for our technology. It requires steel and it requires electricity and gas. That's 50% of your operating cost. So, we find very, very cheap energy in the Middle East, and they're also got a green conversion plan because obviously we want to try and use renewables as quickly as possible as well. So it's a really great location for those reasons, and that's where we chose that region to set up.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask Satya again now, because we talked a lot about technology on future topics. The other really, really big topic is really regenerative agriculture at the moment, resilient agriculture. And you started a huge initiative in India as the best case. And maybe you can detail a little bit down why it has such a huge importance. I mean, for everybody, actually, if you store 0.4% more CO2 in the soil, this would solve the whole carbon problem we have worldwide. So it's a huge, huge impact, and very, very little people know that. So Satya, maybe you can elaborate on that point.
Well, soil has the ability to hold 4 times as much carbon as is in the atmosphere. It doesn't at this time because soil organic carbon for fertile soil should be somewhere in the range of 2.5 to 3%. It's down to less than 0.5% globally. And so that's how bad the situation is. So when scientists tell us that we are only 50 harvests away from not growing anything, they're actually quoting that science, that in the absence of soil organic carbon, you're not going to grow anything because then soil turns to dust, absent the organic matter. So that's the challenge. That's what exactly these farmers are doing. When we talk about these women farmers, what they are doing is, you talked about enhancing microbial growth. They take cow dung and cow urine, which has a lot of friendly microbes, and they add buttermilk or lentil flour, all kinds of accelerants, but natural ones. And actually the microbial count over a period of 72 hours increases millionfold, naturally. You just take a big drum, put cow dung and cow urine and add these additives, all natural, and then you take that and spray on your soil. You coat your seeds. So you do a seed coating, you spray it on your soil, and then when the plants are growing, you spray it on them. There are different concoctions. They use about 200 different biosubstances in addition to the main things, which is cow dung and cow urine. And in India, of course, they use the Bos indicus variety of cows or cattle, which is native to the land, but that doesn't mean that it can't be done elsewhere. Every place has native genetic varieties that actually produce the kind of microbes that are friendly to that ecosystem. So that's the core thing. But more importantly, what is happening is it's actually at 5 different levels. The transformation is extraordinary. You talk about people at the bottom of the pyramid. What is happening is that your input costs drop by anywhere between 50 to 80%, depending on the crop, depending on the agroclimatic zone, and your yields go up anywhere between 30 to 200%. You talked about millets, 200% increase in productivity. Extraordinary. And so that's what is changing. I have actually personally spoken to female farmers who were bankers, who were working in different industries, actually leaving their jobs, young female farmers leaving their jobs and coming back to their villages because they think this pays them more now, which is extraordinary. So, and that's the second thing. The rural to urban migration, you can actually stop that. And people, if they stay in the rural areas, the social cohesion that is there and people living in their own habitats is much greater than going into an urban habitation, losing your identity, and not having the resources that you need to thrive in that ecosystem. So that's the second thing. Third thing is a much bigger problem, which is subsidies, as you talked about, Manon. India currently spends about $26 billion a year on fertilizer subsidies. So we are basically paying for our own destruction. And then all the farm electricity is subsidized, 100%. That's another $18 billion. And why? Because you have free electricity, so keep pumping water. Earlier you would have water at 5 feet under the ground. Now you find it 200 feet under the ground. So you'll actually, we were joking one day with some policymakers that you're soon going to need oil rigs to actually find water under the ground to sustain agriculture. So you could actually repurpose that $50 billion that India spends now. I'm talking about India because that we have worked a lot on that, but every country does the same. And you could actually do that for infant mortality, for child nutrition. You could do a lot of good things with that money. That's the third thing. The fourth, and the most important, is the 40% food loss. When you create that differentiated market for clean food, and you find a way either through powder or through creating, we've actually set up 13,000 farmer welfare centers in the state of Andhra Pradesh, one for every 4,000 population. And now we are working on a model where you'll actually have a modular dry storage and a cold storage, where you can actually take the produce from the farmer and store it for 3 months. If you store it for 3 months, the price goes up by 200%, especially in fruits and vegetables. Perishables, to give you an example, tomatoes, at harvest it sells for 10 rupees a kilo. 3 months, guaranteed it goes up to 30 rupees a kilo. 6 to 8 months, 60 rupees a kilo. So if you can find a way to do that, you can actually get the farmer paid 200% more, while still making money for whosoever runs these warehouses. So that then changes the whole paradigm in terms of waste. And lastly, Ecosystems are coming back with a vengeance. Birds and bees are nesting in agricultural fields. And that's extraordinary. Water savings is 50% compared to conventional agriculture. Public health gains are absolutely, as they say in baseball, knock it out of the park. We did a study by picking up primary health center data in a large number of bio-villages, they call them, villages that have completely shunned agrochemicals, and cancer, anemia, diarrhea, you just name it, major disease groups, the drop in incidence of diseases is 85%. So at every possible level, regenerative agriculture works, whether it is economics, whether it's society, whether it's public health, or even individuals' own household prosperity. It works at every level.
Yeah. Thank you very much. We come to the final question. I just want to do a quick round. Will we be able to rebuild the food system sustainably, seeing the level of interest today, because we need a lot of stakeholders brought in, and in what time frame? Maybe Satya, you start and then we go back.
It can be done. In 10 years' time, the target for us is 120 million smallholders in India to completely convert to natural farming. So it is possible, but it is possible by building virtuous partnerships like this, people on this dais, or people in this room, and not by talking, but by focusing on action, action, action. All conversations are very important, including this one, but only if it leads to some action. Otherwise, we're killing ourselves, we're just talking ourselves to death. Yeah. Thank you.
So my last comment is just in line. We are actually building a global platform. As an example, there is no secret recipe in our platform model. Freelance formulators, ingredient suppliers, machinery suppliers come together. So where we are localized in India and Mexico, in Colombia, in Thailand and in Spain, anytime somebody asks for something that we do not have, we invite some of the platform partners to join. And the last thing is that the people side of empowerment is that now we see new bakeries coming up. We just have a success story that will come online very shortly about high protein bread in Mexico, that actually it's 100% powder plus water. So we see no sustainable bakeries, so we empower entrepreneurship. So the future of food is new FMCG companies, because the other ones, I believe, will not be able to hold on to the trust that was based on brands in the past, but trust will be based on truly transparent and sustainable technology.
Well, I would just add that I don't think that there is a time point where you can say the transition will be done. What I would say is that the change of the transition will go up exponentially every year. And I think there's no lack of innovation. We heard about this today. There's no lack at all. There's plenty of stuff. What's needed is the strength, the capital to do it, but what's needed is you. And I want to say thank you that you stayed on course with us. It means a lot. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And finally, I would say, well, at least from an alternative proteins perspective, there's been many reports and predictions around what the adoption rate will look like over the next 10 to 20-year horizon. So Boston Consulting Group estimated that 11% of all proteins worldwide will be supplied via an alternative source by 2032. It can go up to 22% though, and this is my final point, is when governments and subsidies can be redirected and used wisely. I think we really need to focus, the only way we're going to get to a sustainable food system is by looking at the 80-20, looking at where the biggest bang for dollars goes. So what is your business case analysis? That's what you need to focus on, and then you really need to dedicate and focus on the 80-20, focus on that 80% rather than get distracted with small things that do not move the needle. We need to move the needle on the big things. That's why I did cheese, that's why I did dairy, because that is one of the biggest contributors to global greenhouse gas emissions, water pollution, 90%, is the largest freshwater consumer of all food products. There's a huge impact, and to me, that's where you have to focus. And then when you look at cheese, don't create a brie or a camembert, which is consumed by 0.5% of the consumer, create a pizza cheese, create a mozzarella, create a cheddar, because that is what's going to move the needle. So I always advise to look at where you're going to get your biggest bang for your buck. And if we can do that, and then get government support and alignment on redirecting subsidies or spurring on innovation through collaboratively, we have sophisticated alliances that we can share resources and knowledge. I think that's what's going to make us move the time horizon. It's either going to be 10 years or it's going to be 50, depending on that.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much to everybody.
Thank you.